What's up, everyone? I'm here in my NFL Week 12 DraftKings picks. This week I'm going to be doing the video a little bit different. I'm just going to run through and talk about one of my favorite plays at each individual position. And since I'm going to be out of town later in the week, I decided that I'll toss in a few sleeper slash value picks here at the end of the video. Just going to do this to make it a little bit easier on me because already a lot of stuff going on this week with the holiday. Had to work on my Thanksgiving Day video and whatnot as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. So I'm starting off here with Derek Carr, and as a Carolina Panthers fan, it really pains me to realize how good of a play he really is. For some reason, this Oakland Raiders offense has figured out how to rip NFC South opponents apart. He threw for 319 yards and 1 touchdown against the Saints, threw for 299 and 3 touchdowns against the Falcons, and threw for 513 yards and 4 TDs against the Buccaneers. So, like I said, I don't know what it is, but they figured it out. The Carolina Panthers passing defense is borderline the worst of those four. The Saints is really bad as well. I mean, the Falcons aren't even that good either. But I will say, though, the Carolina Panthers secondary has played better the past few weeks. So that is something to keep in mind. And the Raiders actually don't play quite as good at home for some reason. That's kind of an interesting thing that's floating around. But this game has a really high probability of being a shootout. Vegas has this as the third highest game total right now. So Cam Newton is definitely a good play, but Derek Carr is so cheap that I think he's just kind of borderline a must play, honestly. So next up I have Jay Ajayi, and usually I'm not a guy who likes to show up late to a party, and I'm not usually a guy who's going to jump on the bandwagon late like this, but Ajayi has a really good matchup this week. So first off, he's super expensive at $7,600. This is by far the most expensive he's been all season. And I think that people are going to be off of him a little bit because he's so expensive. And he hasn't played particularly great the past few weeks. He's played okay, but the last 2 games that he's played, he's only put up 79 and 77 rushing yards apiece. So both of those games are on the road. This guy is a different type of player at home, and he is a complete animal. So first off, he has a rushing touchdown in every single home game this season in Miami. Also, in his last 3 home games, he's averaging 176.3 rushing yards. Add in the fact that how good of a matchup it is. I mean, the 49ers are terrible against running backs. They're allowing the most fantasy points per game in the NFL at 33.4. They've also allowed the most rushing yards in the NFL and the most rushing touchdowns. So this is a perfect spot for Jay Ajayi. I'm a little worried he may let us down. He's definitely not my favorite running back on the board, but I definitely think he's a guy you got to consider. I don't know if I'm going to play him in cash or not because he's so expensive, but he definitely has a killer matchup this week. All right, so next up I have Larry Fitzgerald, and I like this price and this spot a lot for him. So first up, Fitz has 50 targets in the last 4 games. 50. And in that span, his price has actually come down. He didn't have any monstrous games. He had a pretty good one against the 49ers. He played well the past few weeks. I mean, nothing outrageous, but he has 50 targets. I mean, you can't complain with that at all. Atlanta is allowing 385.9 yards of total offense, which is the 5th worst in the NFL. They're also allowing 39.9 fantasy points per game to wide receivers, which is also the 5th worst in the NFL. So this is a pretty good spot for Fitz. Also, if you take a look at this Falcons game log against the wide receivers they've faced, these big, large, physical wide receivers really have the best of them right now. So, I mean, in week 1, Mike Evans had a touchdown against them. Michael Thomas had a touchdown against him. Michael Crabtree, Kelvin Benjamin, Demaryius Thomas, all these guys scored touchdowns. Terrell Williams had a big game. He didn't get in the end zone, but had over 140 receiving yards. Mike Evans, again, last time they faced, had over 150 receiving yards and a pair of touchdowns. So these big, physical wide receivers, just like Larry Fitzgerald, have really gotten the best of this Atlanta Falcons team, and that's one of the biggest reasons I'm looking at Larry Fitzgerald this week. So next up, I have Julian Edelman, and this is a guy that I talked about last week and ended up working out very well for me. He's coming off of a 17-target game. Gronkowski is not going to play once again. He's facing off against this weak New York Jets passing defense. Now, I will tell you that the Jets have looked better in the passing game, or at least the passing defense game, the past few weeks, but they faced Cleveland, Miami, and Los Angeles. So nothing too impressive in their opponents. So I expect Tom Brady and Bill Belichick to be on the same page. The Jets are coming off of a bye. It will be in New York, but there still should be a ton of Patriots fans there. So I expect the Patriots to still win this game very handedly, and hopefully Edelman will be involved. So with AJ Green going down to injury, Tyler Eifert has really emerged as a pretty good tight end play this week, in my opinion. He's going up against the Baltimore Ravens, who I have voiced repeatedly that I do not think they're an elite defense. They do not impress me. I think they're an okay defense, but I think Eifert is definitely a good play in the sense that we should see his usage naturally go up. There's less options now on this team. Giovanni Bernard has gone down as well, so Jeremy Hill is not a guy who gets involved in the passing game, so they're probably going to be looking for shorter routes, and Tyler Eifert is usually a sure-handed option. He did have one pretty big game since he's come back from his injury, but since then he's been kept pretty quiet. So I expect him to see a big uptick in usage, and hopefully that can lead to him having some big games moving forward. All right, so I'm going with the chalky defense this week in the Buffalo Bills. It's pretty much become well known around the league to pretty much just pick the defense that is facing off against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jacksonville is tied with San Diego for the most giveaways per game at 2.2. Buffalo is at home. Looks like this should be a game where you can see Blake Bortles turn the ball over a couple times, and hopefully, this hefty price for the Bills will pay off. All right, so moving into some of my sleeper/value picks, and Carson Palmer at $5,300 is too cheap in my opinion. Yes, he's looked poor recently. He's made some bad throws, some stupid decisions, and has cost this Arizona Cardinals a few games by just trying to do too much and not doing enough at certain times. That said, in the last 4 games, the lowest point production he's had would be 15 points, and that was last week against the Minnesota Vikings in Minnesota. That's a tough matchup. Yes, the Vikings haven't played quite as well on defense recently, but it's still a really, really tough matchup. He's thrown a touchdown pass in 3 of those 4 games, and in the game that he didn't throw a touchdown pass, he still threw for over 300 yards, and he's thrown for over 300 yards in 3 of those 4 games. So Palmer is all right. The Cardinals are going to be just fine. This is a good spot for him against the Falcons. Falcons should put up quite a few points in this game, so it could be a shootout, hopefully. And if that's the case, this would be a good opportunity to stack Carson Palmer and Larry Fitzgerald, and I think that's playable in cash in my personal opinion. All right, so next up I have Tyler Boyd, and I already talked about it a little bit with Tyler Eifert, but with the absence of AJ Green and also Giovanni Bernard, and a lot of people probably aren't going to talk about Bernard, but he's a big blow to the team as well because he was getting quite a few looks in the passing game as well. So Jeremy Hill is a guy you probably need to take a look at moving forward too, because he's obviously going to get all the carries, but he'll probably get a few looks in the passing game as well too, which usually isn't the case with him. But Tyler Boyd is a guy who really filled in the shoes for AJ Green pretty well. I mean, he's definitely not going to do as much damage as Green does, but he's getting some of that usage pushed his way. He had 8 targets, 6 receptions, and a receiving touchdown last week. Hopefully he can do something similar to that this week. He's probably going to be a really popular pick in cash games in my opinion, I think. So definitely look his way, and hopefully some of these Bengals players can step up and fill in the shoes properly for AJ Green. All right, so finishing up here with Sterling Shepard, there's a couple of different reasons why I like him in this matchup. So first off, he actually set a career high in targets last week at 11, and he's actually caught a touchdown pass in the last 3 games. Now, if you take a look at this dude's game log, it actually makes a lot of sense because he's actually turned into the Giants' safety valve, in my opinion. So Odell Beckham is obviously going to be the guy who they're going to try to break open the top of the defense with and kind of get get behind your safeties and whatnot with him. But Shepard is going to be that guy that Eli is going to just dink and dunk it to when there's nobody else open. He's obviously very comfortable throwing it to Shepard because he continues to get 7 or 8 targets every single week consistently. And he's a guy who's not going to get a ton of receiving yards, honestly. I mean, he's only had 2 games all season with more than 70 receiving yards, and 2 of those were in the first 3 games of the season. So I do think that this is a potential spot where we could see a couple of big plays out of him, though, to be honest, because I think that it's likely Joe Hayden is going to be shadowing Odell Beckham Jr., obviously. So that's obviously going to be putting some of the lesser players in that Browns secondary on Shepard. And I think that, this defense could get caught up in trying to prevent Odell from having a big play against him, and eventually it'll end up letting another player have a big play against him, and I definitely like Sterling Shepard for that. Some people are probably going to be on like Will Tye or maybe even Victor Cruz and Rashad Jennings. I mean, honestly, you can almost pick anybody against this Browns team, and they can, have a successful game. I don't know why, but I do think the Browns have a chance to win this game. You would think they're going to win one eventually, but, who knows. but I definitely think that Sterling Shepard is a really good play in this particular situation. Alright, so that's going to do it for this video. I'm sorry I wasn't able to go as in depth and give out as many players as I usually do. Hope you guys understand. Hope you guys have a good holiday week, and hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next one, and good luck in week 12. Later.